Welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast, where we dive into practical leadership insights that are, well, obvious. Your hosts have walked the talk, and now they're sharing their knowledge, strategies, and advice. Let's jump into today's episode and explore the world of leadership with your hosts, Joey and Omar.
Well, guys, welcome to another one of our episodes. You want to kick us off today? Because I know that you mentioned there's a couple topics that you wanted to touch base on, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got some questions, man. I've been fighting with myself all week about some things. So let me ask you a question, all right? So let's talk about game day, right? Game day is on the floor. You're talking in front of a customer, right?
Yep.
And we talked about preparing for game day and what role a manager has when it comes to game day, right? It's all about the preparation. It's about preparing that individual for being in front of that customer.
Yeah.
I guess what I have a question about is, when is it appropriate for the coach to be on the field on game day?
Honestly, so in my experience, right, if you guys have different opinions, feel free to share. But in my opinion, my experience has been coach shows up, right? Just like you do at the big game, the coach is there to be able to help the quarterback, right? Help the rest of the players ensure that they got the support that they need to be able to get what they need done, right? And what happens in my experience is, when the coach isn't there, can the team perform? Yes. Are there going to be a lot of plays that are missed? Are there going to be a lot of opportunities that aren't going to get captured? Definitely. They're going to end up struggling because that support. Now, obviously, it depends on the different industries that you're in, that kind of stuff. But what we're talking about specifically is more, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, more of like a retail location, more of, you have like a brick and mortar, you have people coming to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's just one of the things. I'm like, well, I'm a hands-on guy, right? And I love helping people, right? But as the manager, like, one of the things I had to learn, and I learned this like years back, was, hey, if you're on the field, you can't see everything that's going on, right? You don't have that bird's eye view.
Yep.
To say, hey, look, this is where we are not performing, or this is where we need a little bit more attention. And as the game goes on, or as the day goes through, you can't adjust on the fly if you're on the field, is the way I feel.
Yep. And that's where you have your different leaders, right? So obviously you have a head coach, you got a defensive coach, you have an offensive coach, you have separate eyes. So for me, that was my store managers and my assistant managers. As like a district, an area, regional. Can you visit stores during game days? Yes. Is your presence warranted there after a certain hour? No, because it's distracting.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the different expectations that employees have of different roles, of how they should be, how they should perform, how they should interact, instead of letting them do what they do naturally.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of where you're at. So it depends on the hierarchy that you have and the different roles that you have supporting yourself. If it's just you and a couple of people on the floor, right? Because I've run stores like that. I've had stores like that under my district. Then by all means, in a retail setting, that manager should be on the floor as part of the team performing, because they don't have the physical manpower to be able to take on all the people that are walking in. And it doesn't mean that they themselves are selling, but they are setting up those interactions with the proper expectations and passing them on as soon as somebody becomes available, right?
Yeah, I can recall, man, as a new leader, when I was in banking, right, retail banking, man, I didn't want to sit in my office if the doors are open. I was always out there, and if a customer came in, I was pretty much on the list. Hey, if this other person saw the last customer, I was going to take the other one if there was only one other person there. And I was there to role model the expectations that I had. I was there to make sure that I'm pulling my weight. But what I quickly realized is that the person walking in to open an account, or whatever the case is, has questions about their account. That's not the only people that I was responsible for. I had people coming in to do deposits. I had people coming in to do withdrawals. I had people in the drive-through. And if I was caught up doing something else, like opening an account or something like that, then unfortunately I was not available to handle an issue that may come up on the other side of the bank, right?
Yep.
And that's one of the things that I kind of realized, but it took a leader to say, hey, look, you were doing this, and like, what were you doing at this time when this happened? And I was like, well, I was helping a customer, well, why were you helping a customer? Like, you have people for that. Like, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, I was trying to lead by example, and they said, well, while that's good, you also have to be available to be able to cover some of those, those things that may come up in the moment. And if you're not there, like if the other person that's not doing anything, if you can't count on them to handle it the way you will, then you need to be available. And honestly, that was a hard pill for me to swallow, because I wanted to be on the field with my guys, but and honestly, it was hard to break that expectation of me being on the field, right? Because they were like, hey man, like, why all of a sudden are you not helping out? And I said, well, I mean, honestly, you guys aren't the only people I need to help. I have more people in the branch that also need my assistance. There's also things I need to learn so that we can, adapt and, make more efficient. And I was like, I have to be in more places than just right here. And, eventually they understood.
Yeah. And it takes some time, right? To your point. And that's the big thing. Obviously it all depends on, the bodies of labor that you have to work with. That's always going to be a big thing, because a lot of companies that have smaller locations operate on a like 1 to 3, 1 to 5, where it's one manager to like 3 or 5 employees, and that's it for the entire location.
Yeah.
So not only does the manager, are they responsible for everything else that they're responsible for, but they are also an able-bodied seller on the floor. Now, during slower times, during drive times where you have a like better staffing situation, you're not a seller, you're essentially quarterbacking and setting up the plays for everybody else, right?
Yeah.
You're setting up expectations, you're like talking and greeting to people that are coming in, letting them know what to expect. As soon as somebody becomes available, they'll be able to assist them, blah, blah, blah. If they start getting overwhelmed, that's where you may need to jump in and start taking something up. But your team should understand that if they see you with a customer, the moment the first one of them becomes free, they go to you to relieve you so that you can handle the rest of the flow.
Right.
But those are expectations that you as a leader have to set, because if they expect that, oh yeah, you're going to be selling alongside us the entire time, then you're just a seller at that point, and they're not going to relieve you. They're just going to go do what they need to do the next thing. So that's kind of like, it takes some time to build that. And you just mentioned it took a little bit of time for you to be able to go through that.
Yeah.
But you have to set the expectation. And guys, when it comes to change is both the most constant thing you will have in your life, personal or work. It is also the hardest thing for people to accept, that nobody likes change. As much as we say change is constant, change is always there, people don't like change. They like their routines. They like the way things are. So you're going to feel some pushback. You're going to feel that struggle from them and from you. But you got to get rid of that crutch to be able to have everybody really support themselves and support each other as a team.
Yeah. And, we've talked about it before, man. Setting the expectations is half the battle, man. Because you can't expect it to change because you don't know what their perspective on it, on that particular situation, and that's
my readers.
Yeah. Like that was one of the things I had to tell the guys, like, hey, look, I'm going to have to scale back a little bit because of the attention that I need to split between this and this, and at first they were kind of like, oh, maybe he just doesn't want to work anymore. You know what I mean? He's now he's a big manager and he doesn't want to work, but I mean, I also had to give them the perception that, hey, look, it's not that that's the case. It's that, hey, I'm putting in work over here as well, and I'm putting the attention over here so that we can become efficient. So that, also, actually, if we're more efficient on this side, hey, you're going to be a little bit more busy, and it can affect us in a greatly positive way by giving equal attention to, whoever needs it.
Oh, yeah. And you're going to run into those roadblocks. You've experienced it. I've experienced it. It's natural, guys. that just because you hit some snag, you hit a roadblock while you transition to this style, that's not a bad thing. That means it's actually working, right? And it gives you active feedback on how things are going, where you might need to adjust course a little bit, but doesn't mean, oh, I gotta slam the brakes because we have this small little bump in the road, we don't know how to overcome it. It's just
so I was gonna say it's all about timing as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a place where you're short staffed, and then you're all of a sudden gonna say, "Hey, I'm gonna pull back," like that might not be the best timing to go through that change, you know?
Yep. But I mean, at the end of the day, me personally, I'm not the back of the house manager. I'm not the back of the house leader where I'm just going to sit in the back and be away. There are times, and I know we've talked about it before, because it comes down to time management. You got to manage your time appropriately to understand what time of the day, what time of the week you should be taking care of certain operational items, and then taking care of everything else so that you are freed up for those times where you do need to be a front-facing leader and take care of what needs to get taken care of. Because you're coaching, you're setting up the plays. You may not be the one closing the stuff as far as like taking payment, but you're setting everything up so that as soon as one of your players becomes free and able to, they can come in, catch the ball, and score that touchdown. All right. That's what it's about, is you're setting up those plays, but more importantly, you're setting up your team to succeed, because they're not relying on you to do everything for them. And now the ship can actually be managed appropriately to make sure inventory stuff's taken care of, to make sure supplies are there, to make sure that whatever coaching, whatever administrative stuff needs to get taken care of has to get taken care of. At the end of the day, as a leader, you are responsible as well for the operations. And it doesn't matter how much you sell. If none of that sticks on the back end, right? It's the same crap.
A revolving door.
Exactly. You're doing a bunch of work for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, that kind of leads into the next topic I kind of wanted to talk about, man, is implementing change, right? So when we talk about implementing change, I have the more methodical approach. You know, I like to plan things out, and I know that about myself, and I also know that I over plan, right? and you know, whereas that is a bad thing, because sometimes the more you plan, the more you plan, the more you plan, and you never get to the point where you implement, right? Yeah. And you know, like, it's, I guess my approach is, look, I at least need a good hearty plan before I start to implement, you know, and I need to essentially set myself a time frame to say, hey, look, by this day, even if the plan isn't done, I need to run with what I have, right? Instead of off the cuff, I'm going to go with a change. And, you know, sometimes I feel like that's how some managers approach change, right? You know, they do it off the cuff, but really you didn't plan it out, so it kind of falls to pieces.
Yep, it's not set on a really good foundation, right? But so two things on that. First, I've mentioned, I know we've talked about it before, but right, in the military, you plan everything out, and then the moment the first bullet, the moment you face the enemy, your plans are out the window.
Right.
Plan it out, yes, but expect things to change. Expect that, all right, this is where we're going to start, but we're going to have to make changes as we go along, because things are going to happen. We're going to realize in real time that some stuff isn't working. And if it doesn't work, there's no point in continuing down that road. We need to, you know, adapt and change on the go. The second thing, and I think this would help out, like, you know, if you're like Joey's personality, right? Because I'm not going to say I'm like the off the cuff person, but it's like, all right, it's going to be quick mental, and let's go, and we're going to write it as we go. And we're going to, you know, take charge as we need to. But like your point, I do like to have at least a framework, right? Not details, but at least a framework of where I know I need to kind of be focused at. But saying it out loud, right? Telling your team, telling your leadership, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to start doing it by. Because then it goes from, okay, you keeping it internalized and trying to figure it out and trying to give people information as it goes, to everybody understands. All right, we're going to be doing things differently by this time. And that's where we're going to start implementing it, because that's going to be in the back of their head. And they're going to also be bringing it up, which is in turn going to make you feel responsible to ensure it happens. Right. So it goes from you, kind of like a coaching method, right? Instead of you being the person that does it, you're saying it out loud so that other people will bring it up so that you can hold yourself accountable to it. And that actually helps. That sometimes we'll stir the motor to go. It's kind of like looking in the mirror and telling yourself out loud, this is what I'm going to do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think also the good thing about not holding it in is by trying to include others. We talked about this before. By trying to include others on the plan making, you get a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you get that different perspective and you include that in the plan, and maybe you relieve some of that plan to that person, like now it's a collective plan, right? And now it's not just your plan, it's everybody's plan. And it might be easier to implement that way, right?
Yeah. Just like the great old Shrek has said, it's better out than in, right?
But you talked about the military. Hey, man, we're not going to put the guys on the field without any weapons, right? You at least need the framework of what to expect, right?
Yep. So, and like that's a big thing. And like there's differences between like planning and having a set rigid plan. That's always going to fail because we all know we live in the real world. Nothing goes according to plan. There are going to be changes that need to happen. But when you give your teams frameworks, when you train yourself to adapt based on frameworks, you're able to make those changes in real time on the go without it feeling like it's that wobbly foundation where, okay, I'm just going to throw this together and see how it goes. At least you have an idea of like the end point that you need to get to and certain milestones you need to be able to hit to be able to know that you're getting there so that you can adjust course as you're going through it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I can equate this to is like I'm like a little snowball, right? It takes me a little bit of time to get going, and I definitely overthink things. But once I get my momentum going, and I think that's what it's all about, man. Sometimes I think different perspectives are, hey, if I can get going sooner, I can get momentum sooner. But if you don't have a good framework, right, then you're not going to get anywhere, right? You're just going to you're going to stay at the top of that hill and you're not going to start rolling down.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that does help out, and this is where a lot of people find it, and I don't understand why, right? Find it underrated. The whole theory and the concept of the lone wolf, one is trash. Two, wolves are not lone wolves. You're thinking of coyote. And even then, they typically are not very, very lonely if you actually look at the bigger picture, right? But a pack of wolves, they're wolves. They work together as a team. As a leader, you need to surround yourself, whether it's peers in your organization that you work alongside, that you contact every so often, that you meet up every so often, whether it's through work or outside of work. Having that support allows you to be able to bounce off ideas as well and also get that different perspective. Because you're going to get, to your point, you're going to get perspective from your employees. Yes. Will that help you? Yes. They're going to have some good, useful feedback. But you also have different resources in leadership in, your vertical and an adjacent department in a completely different industry and what's known as a mastermind group, right? It's a group of collective people that get together to bounce ideas back and forth.
Right.
And for us, that's one of the things that we're working with on developing for everybody else as part of the Obvious Leadership Group is having that group of leaders that can really bounce ideas off of each other to grow as individuals. Because there's going to be something that somebody brings up that you're like, you know what? I never thought about it that way. Or they're going to bring something to you that you're like, you know what? That makes sense. Or that's actually a really good problem that we've been having. How did you guys solve it? Right? You can start now having that dialogue and that conversation. And that alone, like reading books will help propel your career and help prepare you for a lot of things out there. Bouncing ideas off and having conversations with people that have done it, are struggling through it, or going through it. I mean, that's better than any college degree is ever going to get you, man.
You know what I equate that to, man? It sounds like a role play.
In a sense, it feels like that, right? But the beautiful thing, though, is that it's because it's such a different type of group, right? Where, they may role play with you. They'll throw things out there. And like we said, right, role playing is essentially you training like you would with any pro athlete team or organization out there. You don't just hope and pray that on game day you're going to be set and ready. You're training up to then, the off season, during season, to get conditioned to ensure that you're fit to be able to play. And in between games, you'll take some breaks, but you're still going to be training with your crew. You're still going to be training to get better at what you're doing, right? Refining your craft.
Yeah, and I think that boils down to, being around, it's kind of surrounding yourself with powerful leaders, right? And so most definitely we get a lot of the ideas, or we get different perspectives and things like from those guys. But I think two things really need to happen for that to be effective, right? First of all, you have to be open to doing things a different way, right? I mean, if you're surrounding yourself with these people, you're not going to be listening to anything they're saying. It's just going to be going in one ear and one out the other, or you're going to hold yourself on a pedestal and you're like, no, I already know how to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
you remember that old school poster in like the classrooms and libraries, like your mind's like a parachute. It only works when it's open.
Yeah, 100%, man. The other thing is you have to surround yourself with those people to be able to get those ideas, right? Because like I said, I think I've said this before, but I didn't become a leader because I was born that way.
Yeah,
it's because people I picked up those habits from.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as a born natural leader. There isn't, right? It's like the most successful person you've ever met really is the person that's failed the most. It's a trial and tribulations. You're going to, rinse and repeat, find out what works. But here's the thing, as a leader, especially, don't reinvent the damn wheel if it doesn't need to be reinvented. And I'm not saying don't innovate. There is absolutely no point why something should be scrapped and started from scratch. If it's working, you can take it from where it's at and be able to mold it and refine it into something better. Yeah. And that's what you get when you start talking to other leaders out there, as far as things that they've done, things that have worked, haven't worked. Because especially what I've learned, if you have a leader that's trying to rework everything from the ground up without taking in context what is existing already and the culture around it, then you really start to butt heads a lot, right? You have to really take what you have there and see how you can refine that into something better by not reinventing, but adjusting course. And that saves you a lot of time and headache. Because so I had a manager at one of my locations many moons ago who we constantly had issues with inventory at their store. And it wasn't like it was very hard to do the inventory, right? And I was like, bro, what are you doing? And obviously I don't say bro to them, but I'm like, what are you doing? Like, walk me through how you're doing these, because every single month we have to continuously redo this. And I have to come out here, and that takes time out of my schedule to need to do this when it shouldn't be that difficult, especially when you're not even the biggest store in the market.
Right.
And I had him walk me through, and he was trying to do a brand new approach to scanning products in. I'm like, I applaud, the concept. Here's the thing. We've tried that before. It hasn't worked. And I've tried that many years ago in a different state. I know for a fact it doesn't work. I've told you it doesn't work. Stop doing that and get it done the right way. If you find a faster way to do it, cool. But this is not faster if we need to redo this 2 or 3 times when it needs to be done once.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to know the difference between when it's appropriate to try to reinvent something and when it's better to just leave it as is, because it's giving you the result that you need, and you can put your focus on something that's going to be more impactful.
Yeah, well, we always talk about leadership as a journey, right? So you're never going to just get off the highway and start planning your trip because it's taken too long. You're like, okay, come on, guys, let's stop it and let's just try and find a different way. Like, I mean, unless you're in the wrong direction and you need to turn around, maybe that's what you need to do. But if you're already on the road to getting to where you need to be, and you need to make a little bit of an adjustment, like, let's not take any tolls, or like, you're never just going to pull off the road and stop, right? That's just that you shouldn't be doing that to yourself or the people around you, I feel.
Yeah, like there obviously, I'm not going to say every single system method is perfect.
Yeah.
But if it's not broken and it works to a degree, cool. If you have time to be able to innovate a change that makes it simpler or faster, okay.
Yeah.
But when you see that it's literally taking you 10 steps back, that's when you need to understand that, all right, I need to drop and let this go and move to something that's going to be actually giving me appropriate results for the time and effort I'm putting in, right?
Yeah.
So
I agree. So I also wanted to mention something. So you talked about leading like a wolf. Have you ever seen that article about a wolfpack leader?
Yeah, they're actually in the back, not the front.
Yeah. Man, I think that's something that everybody, it's a different perspective on leadership. And maybe we can post that as a link or something for somebody to go watch, to read over, man. But like, it's just different. Like, I didn't know that wolves actually think that way, man. I was like, man, that's amazing, dude. And it's just a different kind of leadership.
Yeah, and for those wondering what he's talking about, is in an actual wolf pack, the main leaders, and it's not the alpha male, it's typically a female that's really leading the pack. The female is really the one in the front, and then you have the actual like guard, which is one of the males in the rear to ensure that the older and the younger ones in the pack don't get left behind, and they can protect themselves from any other predator or things like that. So you have essentially multiple different forms of leadership happening as they travel, right? And that's the biggest thing. And it's one of the things we've talked about, how there's not just you as a leader, but there are different aspects of leadership within your team. And you need to learn to rely on that. One, to make your life easier. Two, to get people promoted so that you can get yourself promoted. Right.
Yeah. It's all that, and it's just taking care of people that are really taking care of you. I mean, you have to be cognizant of that, and if you're not paying attention to that, people are going to notice.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not something you want to be known for, and it's not something you want to do, because it will only take you so far. Right. Like with me, I've told you this, my biggest thing for, being successful is how many people I can get promoted, how many people I can lift up. That's, to me, what actual success looks like, because I'm helping people imagine things that they never could imagine, that I myself at one point couldn't imagine for myself. Right. It's giving others that vision and giving something back to your team. And you can take community as well, right? Because your team is your community.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just, and you also, you got to make sure that you're genuine, man, because, people can tell if you're just putting up a front, right? Yeah. Whether you like it or not, people are going to see through it, and your true colors are going to show. And that's why, I think it's just so obvious to be genuine, right? And if it's something that you're working on, be upfront about it, like, it's something that people may understand if you communicate that that's what you're trying to change.
Yeah. And I mean, say it out loud, move with it. Just know when to reinvent and when to innovate, right? That's the biggest thing. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Like I said, man, nobody's going to pull off the road, especially in the middle of the night somewhere, or in the middle of the trip when you have a timeline, like nobody's going to pull off the road and just stop. All right. Now you may need to put gas, and you can think while you're putting gas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, if you think about it, right, it's kind of like having GPS. Grabbing your GPS, it could be your phone, obviously, chucking it out the window as you're driving, and then trying to find an old school map. You remember those, right? Yeah. And trying to figure out where you're at on the map, and all right, we're going to go this route instead. It's like that's what a lot of times trying to reinvent the wheel is like. Because for something like that, one, it should be a pet project that shouldn't affect any operations during the day, right? When you got free time to try it, cool, we can try it. But for the most part, if you're focusing on reinventing, I'm not reinventing, innovating, right? Yeah. That you typically can do on the go. It's not going to change and really impact anything on a negative manner that's going to set you back tremendously, right? And if it works, boom, it will make things a lot better for you.
Yeah. It's like it's that fork in the road, man. You ain't gonna stop, and it's either you go one way or the other, but you're gonna continue going forward, right? You can't stop. So that's where traffic.
But no, it's one of those topics where we can talk a lot about it, right? And you can get into specifics about like the nitty gritty, the psychology of it, because a lot of it has to do with like routines and habits that are ingrained in people, and why it's harder to be able to break that. And it also has to do with, and it's at the tip of my tongue, but it's something we see right now, like on the grander scheme of things, where you just are not going to go against something because somebody else has said it. And even though you don't 100% agree with the stance, you're going to stay there and be like, well, this is work, blah, blah, blah. It just becomes where you start butting heads, right? I'm gonna find the term and I'll post it. I'll post it to it so that way you guys know what I'm talking about. But it's easier to have people move and sway with you when it's not against the grain, right? And it's always the small little changes. Remember that when it comes to wanting to make a big change in something that you're doing, it's not the big one-time things that you do. It's all the small little things that you do, to your point, Joey, that become a snowball effect, right? Yeah. It just starts to get its own momentum. You don't have to think about it. It's second nature and it just rolls. Whereas when you do a big change, it's a shock to the system. And yeah, it might work for a short period of time, but there's no sustainability. So what happens? Your body goes back to its natural habits and you go back to doing what you used to do. So you actually lose ground instead of gaining that ground back.
Right.
And that's what I see a lot when you do like a one-time training where it's, a few hours, even if it's an 8-hour training for a single day. There is no follow-up training to ensure that what you learn becomes habitual.
Right.
What your team learned becomes habitual. Right. And that's where old school training methodology in a sales and like in a corporate environment is like, yeah, we're just going to do this one-time thing. We're just going to do this on the weekend. And that's going to be enough. Boom. No. Tell that to every single professional player out there that they only need to train once on something and they're good to go. They're going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah. I mean, as long as many times, if we were to ask a quarterback or a receiver, right? How many times have you guarded a post route, or how many times have you ran a post route? They're going to say, thousands of times, right? Or whether in game or in practice, like it happens all the time. That is a very common route for a receiver to run, right? But yet it's different every time, right? And so you have to make sure that you have your fundamentals down. You have to make sure that things are going the right way for you to be successful in reaching that end zone,
Yep. And that's where your framework comes in mind, because having that framework allows you to make that in real time adjustments without flopping.
I like it. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So train, develop, create frameworks so that it makes everything moving forward easy to adjust and change to and adapt to. Because it doesn't mean you're throwing away everything that you've learned, everything that you've trained with. It means that you're taking that information and you're adjusting it in real time to be able to get to where you need to, or to complete what you need to get completed. Very, very simple. If you can't tell, I'm a big fan of frameworks. It's something, as soon as I learned it, I've developed trainings around it. I've developed people with it. It is a time saver and it works.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I feel like I've come from a place in my career where I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't bred to be a leader. I was a hard worker, right? And if it's one of the things that I wish I would have learned sooner are things like frameworks, or things like basics that we need to master, or, things like that. Like, if you can shorten that curve, you'll get where you want to be sooner, but also you'll get where you want your team to be sooner. Or if you're a small business owner, like you're going to get there a lot sooner. And that's why, I love talking about these things, man, because I feel like people are going to get there sooner. It's just going to be, unlimited growth, I feel, man. So it makes me super excited.
Yeah. To your point, man, it is. And like a big part of what we talked today, just like you said, Joey, this is what helps individuals grow. And it's a launch pad to be able to get to somewhere faster.
Exactly.
Very, very simple, very basic and foundational in principle.
Right.
In practice, woo. It takes a little bit of work, but once you got it mastered, it'll get you there for sure.
There's always something else to master.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man.
All right, brother. Like always, I love having these conversations, man. I love having you guys jump on, take a look at, and see what we got going on. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, awesome, man. I appreciate everybody. Thank you again for letting me put this out on the table and talking it through, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. Catch you on the other side.
All right, man. Later.
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.